having the antiques in the shop, and you just think of some of the stories that could be told with some of the tools that you have, right? And they say you're not an owner of these tools and items, you're just a caretaker, because
Mm.
once you're done with them and I'm gone, they're just going to pass on to the next person because they won't wear out.
Welcome to the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast.
Welcome to it. This is another episode of the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast. I am George and joined Scott. You missed the last episode, but Scott's on the roll back on the show. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks. Yeah, we're going to make up for it tonight. It's going to be a good one.
I feel like we might be like going back in time tonight. Like I was doing like some research for this guest that we're going to have on tonight, and I was like, man, like this is like we're going back a couple hundred years, you know, like I feel like medieval. So, welcome to the show, Will Steed. Thanks for coming on, Will.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this is certainly interesting. I don't get to do this every day, that's for sure. So thank you again.
Will is a full-time blacksmither, which is like not a trade that you hear too much about nowadays. You could find some of Will's work. I mean, I've been just scrolling through Instagram. He's got some really cool stuff. The underscore forge underscore co underscore CDN, and also the website theforgeco.ca. You can find some more about Will there. Will, how did you turn this into a career?
Well, honestly, just started out as a hobbyist and was doing it in my garage. And I will give credit to my wife. She once I had been doing it for a while, I was doing craft fairs and markets and things like that with smaller items that I was making and building up my skill level. And I kept having people ask me if they would, if I would teach a few things to them. So my wife said one day, why don't you run some classes? So we kind of set that up, and yeah, it's been full steam ahead. The classes and, the work, the custom commissions I do, it's probably about 50-50 right now. So, but yeah, it just went from a hobby. I completely went head over heels for it, jumped into it, spent all my free time doing it, and just built up my skill level and watched tons of videos and tried to hang out with other blacksmiths and learn from them and just absorb as much as I could over a few years. So, I was millwrighting before that, so I'm used to, welding, cutting, fabricating, things like that. So, working with steel and hot metal wasn't something that was completely foreign to me. So it's just all the skill levels or the skills that you need to have to make yourself marketable as a blacksmith. They're learned, and then you just practice. So basically it was a ton of practice to get to the point where I am now, and you never stop learning. That's the thing about this trade. Anybody who says that he can't learn anything from other blacksmiths is a liar, because everybody does something a little bit different, and there's always new tricks to pick up. So, which is something, that I really uh, agree with, lifelong learning. And
Yeah.
I try to do that every day, right?
Speaking of classes, so like that kind of ties into Hinton and the Northern Rockies too. Like Will's coming up here for the third year in a row to do a class or a couple classes at the Northern Rockies Museum. So what are you teaching? What are you teaching us in Hinton, Will?
We're going to do a 1 day knife class. So it's a full day, like 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. and pretty intensive. We forge out a complete knife with a handle, sharpen it up. You can make yourself a kitchen knife or a hunting knife or a chopper or something like that. It's a very, very busy day, smaller class size so that I can focus on people. And yeah, everybody leaves with a sore arm and a smile.
Cool.
And then we're going to do, I think, at least one or two railway spike knife classes, which are less intense. They're only about 2.5 hours long. And you take a railway spike, which there are plenty up in Hinton, and forge out a pretty cool knife with it. So,
Wow. I love it.
So that's really interesting, and it makes me think of types of steel. And I do know people use railway spikes, and I'm sure you could do a whole podcast just on the science of steel and alloys. But what type of steel are you using for the knife workshop, for example?
So we use a high carbon steel. So
Mm-hmm.
it equates to about a 1084. So
Mm-hmm.
it is classified as high carbon. The carbon in the steel is what makes it hardenable, because the carbons, once you quench it, it turns into a crystalline structure within the steel called martensite, and that is what gives you your hardness and the ability to put an edge on it. So the higher the carbon, the harder the steel will get, and you can get steel that is too hard to forge into a knife. But the 1084 range or 1080, the 1080 range is pretty good. Um, when we do the railway spike knives, we use a railway spike, and I would call them a medium carbon steel. They are hardenable, and we do use water, but it's not a very super refined high carbon steel. So, it's more of a general purpose kind of have a camping knife that you can beat up a little bit. You're not going to hurt it. Or something in the shop that you need a kind of a utility knife. But it's not something you're going to go and skin out a moose with. It just won't keep an edge that long, right? They do sharpen up, and basically whenever a knife leaves my shop, even a railway spike knife, you can shave with it. It just, you would have to sharpen it a little bit more than a high carbon steel knife.
Yeah, and maybe talk to us a bit about steel, because I'm old enough to remember when high carbon knives were kind of all the rage. It was the thing. That I'm talking decades ago, and stainless steel at that time seemed to be a little frowned upon, and now it seems stainless steel has gotten better than it
Well, it has.
was.
They come out with new steels, and
Yeah,
which is pretty interesting, right? There are new stainless steels that are hardenable, and like most of the kitchen knives and things like that you buy, and if they're not super duper high quality, they're going to be stainless steel. They'll probably be unhardenable. That's why typically a professional chef will have high carbon steel knives made, or purchase them rather than stainless steel, because they are hardenable and they're easy to sharpen and they stay sharp longer. But the new stainless steels that are out are pretty interesting. And there are some people that are actually making some very high quality knives out of them. The heat
yeah,
treating process is way more extensive than the 1000 series steels that we use in our workshops. Like we're talking, they do a cryo freeze beforehand with liquid nitrogen, and then a special heat treating process, and then the tempering cycle has to be very precise. So your temperatures have to be pretty much bang on when you're tempering, and that's just not something we can do in the field. That's why I prefer to use the 1000 series steels in the field. They're very forgiving. You can do an oil quench, you can do a field temper on them, and they come out, really nice. You're going to get a Rockwell hardness of between, I would say, 60 and 55. I like to think that most of them, testing in the field, they come out around a 50 Rockwell, which is perfect for a knife. It's not going to be impossible to sharpen, and you can, it'll keep an edge for quite a long time. But yeah, those
yeah.
new stainlesses that come out, I haven't dabbled in that, because to be perfectly honest, I don't make a ton of knives to sell. Like, I make them for friends and family. To me, there's no money in it, and that might burst a lot of bubbles. But really, by the time you put all that effort and time into hand sanding a knife and fit and finish, and your handle scales are perfect, and which is quality that people expect when they're buying a professionally made knife, you're working for $5 an hour. And I think
I totally get it, Will. I build bows from the bush, and I've had people request to buy that sort of stuff from me, and I'm like, or baskets. I make baskets. It's like you wouldn't want the price tag, even at $5 an hour. It would your jaw would hit the floor, because the amount of days and months, even years, to season the wood and do everything right. It's a labor of love, right? But I had a
yeah,
custom
exactly.
made knife. Sorry, I had a
All the
custom made.
time.
You go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I had a custom made knife made from the States, and I know there's a big passion for people to work with blacksmiths and knife makers now. And I paid top dollar. And the guy, I said, what would be the best steel you could make this? And he told me crew wear. Does that ring a bell for you? And
Not off the top of my head, no.
yeah, so he made this out of what he called crew wear steel, and he charged a lot, but it's a beautiful knife. It's my favorite knife. Had stag antler on the handle, and
Yeah.
it's a nice 5-inch blade on that thing, and I use it all the time, skinning moose and elk and bushcraft. So yeah.
Yeah, and and there are people that are doing it and are doing it as a living. But what I've just the research that I've done on it, what they're doing is, it's not one of stuff. It's they're doing a production run. They're having their blanks laser cut or plasma cut out, and they're grinding them to shape and then putting handle material on them, and they turn out beautiful. So yeah, there are people that are doing that, but the guy that's working out of his garage and doing the one-ofs, to me, it just doesn't seem worthwhile or profitable. Like I run a business, right? So, my return on the hours that I invest in something, I have to be looking at making a profit, or what am I doing, right?
Yeah.
So, to me as a blacksmith, it's the ornamental ironwork, it's the decorative work, it's the gates and the railings that are the biggest part of my business that way. So whereas knife making, it's fun to play around with it. I also don't have the patience to sit there and hand sand for 6 hours, so that's just not my thing. I'd much rather spend 6 hours building a gate for someone than sitting at a bench and hand sanding. So, but it's each to their own. Some people enjoy that stuff. That's just not my speed.
Will, can you walk us through what your like shop looks like? Like what you're like in my mind, I'm picturing like a big bowl of lava and there's like a horse behind you and some horseshoes. Like what's the modern day blacksmithing outfit look like?
Well, I don't touch horses. Horses and I don't see eye to eye. Every horse I've ever owned or every horse I've ever been on has either bit me, stepped on me, or bucked me off. So I'm not a farrier, and all the power to those people that work with horses. Me and horses don't see eye to eye. But I have a 2,500 square foot shop, and the front half is gallery space. So I have my work desk up there. I have a work table for doing leather work and stuff. And then I have items for sale and all things that I've made on display and things like that. So people can come in and have a look and get an idea of what they may want in a railing or a gate or something like that. I also do, I buy and sell anvils, and I'm a dealer for forges. So I have that.
Wow.
I have sanding belts. Basically, the whole idea with the front shop was to be a one-stop shop, and people can come in and buy everything they need to get started in the craft. And I make and sell tongs and tools and hammers and all that stuff as well. The back half of the bay is the workshop. So I have usually sitting with about 8 anvils in the shop, from the 125 pound to 400 pound range. And those are for teaching and for working on. So they're on stands or stumps or wooden blocks. You set them on, that kind of dulls the sound a little bit. I currently have 3 power hammers. So something I will mention is I have a bad habit of collecting antique tools. So all of my anvils and all of my power hammers are antiques, pushing 120 years old. So, and they work like the day they were made. They're wonderful tools.
What is a power hammer?
So a power hammer is it's just think of your arm, but on a whole nother level, 1,000 times more powerful, and it doesn't tire out. Okay. So I have what are called trip hammers. So they're a design that came around in the late 1800s. Early 1900s. They were mass produced in Canada and the US. Big name is Little Giant. So the hammers that I have are Canadian Giant. They were built in Hessler, Ontario, right around the turn of the century into the early 1920s. And it has a motor driven shaft with a flywheel on it, and then a connecting assembly that is on springs. So it lifts the hammer up and drops it at force about 120 times a minute, sometimes a little faster depending on what you're doing.
Ooh.
So it's a 50-pound head, and it hits 120 times a minute, and it doesn't tire out. So you can just move a ton of metal with that. I have a drop hammer that was right around the turn of the century. 1896, I think, is the patent on it. So it was early 1900s. So that is basically a gravity drop hammer. It's picked up, the 50-pound head is picked up mechanically, and then it is dropped under gravity. And that is very good for doing precise set work and punching holes and things like that. And then the other power hammer I have is a 1938 Blacker, and that is a treadle style hammer with a big heavy head on it, and it powers that hammerhead against a 400-pound anvil, and that thing is an absolute beast. We can move 2.5 inch steel with that with ease. It's actually kind of scary. When I first started it up, when I was setting it up and installing it, I scared the crap out of myself with it. It hit so hard, it's shocking. It's a bit definite. You got to wear ear protection. You can feel it in the floor, I'll tell you that. So these are tools. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you talk about the hammers. I understand too, certainly not all anvils are made the same either in their quality. And I've seen, comparisons on YouTube from different quality anvils from around the world. What are you looking for in a good anvil?
You want something that's not beat to death. A lot of the antique anvils, the old anvils you'll find were on the family farm, or they were used in a shop, and they'll be sway back, so they'll have a big groove or indentation on the surface of the anvil. The edges will all be chipped off. It's still usable, but if you're trying to make things straight and flat, then you can run into some problems. I personally like all the antique anvils. In my mind, the steel was much better quality 100 years ago, because they weren't recycling metals. They were using fresh ore. They knew the exact competition or the composition of that metal when it was going to come out of the foundry. So to me, that makes a better quality anvil. Hence why I have, now I think I have over a dozen 100-year-old anvils in my shop, and I take them on the road and whatnot. But you want something that's going to be, usually the way they were made was they were a wrought iron base. So they used original wrought iron, something that we don't have access to today. They don't commercially produce it. They would make that into the base of the anvil, and then they would put a hardened steel layer on top, maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch deep, and they would forge weld that. So they would basically heat it up in a giant foundry or coal forge, get it hot enough so the metal fuses together. So you have a wrought iron base, and then you have a very hard or hardenable surface on the top to work from, and that's the face of your anvil.
So it's a super hard face, but it's not so hard that it's brittle. Correct?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So you don't want to be chipping edges and things like that on it, or having shards fly off of it. So it is a hardened surface, or a hardenable steel, but there's some malleability to it that you're not going to. Never mind my dogs there. That you're going to be able to work on it. That's case in point. You never take two hammers and smack them together on the face, because they're both hardened and you're liable to shatter. So you certainly don't want that with a struck tool or an anvil. So yeah, I like to collect the older anvils. You can tell the different steels. The German anvils are excellent quality steel. Swedish, excellent. English anvils are good, like Brooks and Peter Wright. But the Swedish ones I really prefer. Whenever they pop up, I try to get my hands on them. American made. There's a few good American ones that were made back, in mass quantities down there. What you don't want are the cast iron anvils. And the market is now flooded with those coming over from China and Pakistan. And they're useless for blacksmithing because you don't get any rebound on them. So there's no conservation of energy when you're striking against them, and they'll dent up very, very easily. You basically drop a hammer against it, and it's going to dent that surface. So,
You got a fire going in that shop like 24/7 too?
No. So I use propane forges. So I have a couple in the shop, and then I have coal forges outside. Propane is wonderful because it's clean. You can have it inside as long as you've got ventilation. It's great for teaching classes because it's forgiving, and it gets hot enough to forge weld. So you're talking 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's good for basic general purpose forging. Coal is wonderful stuff to use. It's dirty. So at the end of the day, your face is black and your hands are black, but it gets very, very hot very quickly. So you're able to forge weld in seconds compared to propane, where you have to leave a piece in for 10, 15 minutes to heat up to the proper temperature. In coal, the inside of that fire is white hot. You can barely look at it. And if you're not careful, you'll actually burn your steel and it'll disintegrate in the fire. And we had that happen last night with a friend of mine that was over when we were forging with coal.
Wow.
But he actually picked up his phone and looked at his phone, and you're not supposed to do that. And it was maybe 20 seconds too long. And all of a sudden there's sparks shooting out of the forge, and his Damascus billet that he was working on is now in two pieces. So it happens. Coal is less forgiving, but it is way hotter. And once you kind of master how to work with it, it's wonderful to work with.
Yeah. Will, I had two technical questions I definitely wanted to ask you because we've got a bona fide blacksmith here. In the old days, you break your axe handle, and the old timers would say just burn it out and stick a new one in, and then others say no, you wreck the temper. What would you do with a shattered handle and the piece of wood stuck in the eye there? How do you get it out, and what are you doing?
Certainly not burn it, because yes, you will destroy the temper. Those axes have been hardened and then tempered, so you temper them at a controlled temperature, say 400 or 500 degrees, enough to pull some of the hardness out so that the steel is not brittle, but also leaving enough hardness in there, making it tougher so that it will accept a little bit of flex in the steel, so to think, and allow you to sharpen it. So burning, like you throw that in a fire, you destroy that temper. It can be saved, but you have to do the heat treating process over again. So you have to do a quench and a temper, and then if you don't know the exact composition of that steel, that's going to be tricky.
So by burning it, you're making it too brittle. Is that right? Is that what's happening there?
No, you're actually making it too soft. So when you throw it back in the fire, you overheat it and you destroy the heat treating process.
So how would you get that handle
out? Punch it. Basically, cut it off and get some good drifts or a punch and chisel it out. Essentially, I use larger punches. I have a couple of them in the shop. They're just a blunt end punch that'll fit in the eye of the axe, and you just hammer that on a vise so that it comes out. You'll get it out. They shouldn't, an axe handle shouldn't be pinned in. They shouldn't have a cross pin in them. You should just be able to punch them right out.
Okay. The other technical question was on knife sharpening, and you talk to any knife junkies and they all have their favorite way. Are you a whetstone, oil stone, carbide, electrical sharpener? What would you recommend for folks?
If you're just sharpening your knives at home, then a whetstone, either water or oil, and a good quality one. Japanese stones are great. The ones you get at Canadian Tire are so-so. There's lots online that are the high grits, 1,000, 2,000 grit stones. You don't necessarily need something that high to put a good edge on. That'll help you if you're really trying to refine your blade. But personally, we start our bevels on the grinder, on the belt sander, the 2x72s, and then I take it to a power whetstone that I have in the front of the shop. So we whetstone it to hone the edge until you get a burr. And you'll do the same thing with a flat stone, like either an oil or a water whetstone. So you sharpen it until you get a burr on one side and flip it over and you get a burr on the other side, and then take it to a strop. So just like the old barbers had in to hone their straight razors, a piece of leather on a flat surface, and you're working that edge back and forth to reduce that burr. You can put on some buffing compound or a very, very fine grit on the leather, and that'll help. So I have a power strop, and then I take it one step further, and I have a buffing wheel, and that just helps to refine that edge even more, to the point where you're shaving quite easily on your arm as it goes out the door.
So what do you think?
But a decent quality whetstone on your kitchen table with a piece of leather to strop it afterwards. And with some practice and maybe watch a YouTube video on your angles and procedure, you're going to get a fairly sharp knife with some practice.
Well, these things that are selling online, you got your carbide that you slide it through and it chews up your knife, or your electric sharpener. Does that make you cringe, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would never use one of those power electric dry
stuff.
Sander, no, because the risk of you destroying your cutting edge on your knife is pretty high. Always something manual, unless you're super confident. The power whetstone is really nice because it's nice and slow and it's not super aggressive, so you can really touch that blade up however you want it and get a nice angle. Ceramics are great. When I was younger in another life, I was in the military on board ship, and I used to make pocket change by sharpening everybody's knives because I grew up in the bush in northern Saskatchewan, and I had a trap line and it was hunting and all that. So I knew how to sharpen when I was, in my early teens. And you flip over a coffee cup and you'll have the rough edge on the bottom of the coffee cup. It's ceramic. It's a wonderful knife sharpening tool. If you don't have a strap, take off your belt. There's your strap. So, improvisation, right? And it works. Like if you're stuck for materials, just look around your kitchen.
Yeah. I want to see you doing that next time you're at Smitty's, Scott. Just turn your coffee cup over and start sharpening your knife on it.
Yep.
Yeah, we probably asked to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will, one thing you mentioned that will tie into, we have a podcast question of the week. And I kind of got this question because I was looking on your website and you mentioned there that you love using like antique pieces and you have a lot of antiques. So our podcast question of the week was, what antique piece or tool do you use on a regular basis? I was talking to my wife trying to figure out what we use that's antique, and we have like grandma's old plates that she got from her grandma we use nightly, and like they're shiny and fancy, and every time someone comes over, they're like, oh wow, these are like fancy plates. And so I encourage anyone that has like a nice set of plates, just put them into rotation because it'll make your rice taste a little better. Ken wrote in saying my truck's probably an antique. He uses that daily. Gail said their kitchen table's over 100 years old, so that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
And Joan wrote in saying she still uses the grater that her mom received as a wedding shower gift back in 1942. So an old she showed us a picture of it too. It's like an old like cheese grater. So Scott, anything comes to mind that you would use on a regular basis that's like an antique?
It's interesting because I think I'm starting my own antiques because I moved around so much in life, and as you know, I've got 6 kids and a grandkid, and it gives me a good excuse for buying high quality knives and rifles and axes. And I keep thinking, when I pass away, these things will go to my family members. They're going to remember me for generations. And I wish I had something where I could pick this up and say, this was from great granddad. This was his hunting knife that he skinned elk and moose and bear with. And I don't have any of that, but I'm going to be the one to start that trend in the family and pass on some wonderful heirlooms. And it also gives me a great excuse to buy high quality stuff and not feel guilty about it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Will, how about you? Anything like, let's say, so you got a bunch of like anvils that are 100 years old in the shop. Like, how about in the house, like in day-to-day life? Anything that's like real antique you using?
We drag out my wife's grandmother's silverware
Mm.
for Easter and Christmas and stuff like that. So that's, fairly commonplace. Um, as for like plates and cups and stuff like that, that's all modern stuff that we have. But yeah, the old silverware gets drug out a couple times a year and we use that. Um, yeah, just cool stuff like that. And I'm a firm believer in those old things should be used to kind of keep that memory alive. Hence why I like having the antiques in the shop. And you just think of some of the stories that can be told with some of the tools that you have, right? And they say you're not an owner of these tools and items, you're just a caretaker, because
Mm.
once you're done with them and I'm gone, they're just going to pass on to the next person because they won't wear out.
Oh, I
That's
like that.
great.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
So what's in the
So
shop that, like, you mentioned when these anvils come up like for sale, like you find, like, how are you finding these? Where, like, how do you find a 100-year-old anvil? There's some kind of
they, surprisingly, they show up on Facebook Marketplace or on Kijiji.
mhm.
Occasionally, you'll find one that isn't overpriced because, thanks to Forged in Fire, everybody thinks that the old barn anvil that went through, three fires and was used for 100 years is worth $1 million, and that's not the
Yeah.
case. So, they can be valuable, but we're not talking ridiculous amounts of money. They're, even though it's 100 years old, if it's completely beat to death, then you can't use it. So there's kind of no point in having it, right? But yeah, you'll find the occasional one that'll come up at a decent price, and I'll snap them up. I've also, because I run the shop, and I've been doing this for a number of years now, I'm starting to get known as the guy that'll buy and sell this stuff. So I've had people come to me or bring things to me and say, "Hey, do you want to take this either in consignment or buy it outright?" So we'll make a decision based on that. So
Mm.
there are collectors out there that the wife says, "Hey, you got to get rid of some of your stash."
Yeah.
And if I find out that, I jump all over them, right?
What's
Yeah.
Because that happens too, right?
what's a decent
Um,
price on an anvil? Like, what's an anvil go for?
$5 to $7 a pound.
Mm.
So 100 pound anvil, anywhere from 5 to 700, 750 if it's in really good shape and it's
Wow.
a well-known brand. Yeah. There's people out there that want 10, $12 a pound, and that's just ridiculous. At the height of the show's popularity of Forged in Fire, yeah, the market was there, but prices have started to come down now, and as people realize that you don't have to pay that kind of money. So yeah, you can find the deals, but yeah, between $5 and $7 a pound, really. You want something that's not going to be completely beat to death and it's got a flat surface. If there are chipping on the edges, that's not the end of the world either. They can be ground with you can grind them down with a grinder, or and just take the pitting off or the rough edges off and continue to use it. On an anvil, you don't necessarily want a super sharp edge because that's going to mark up your work. If you want a sharp edge, you can make a tool that'll go in the hardy hole on your anvil, and you use that when you need to. But generally, the side of the work surface on the anvil doesn't have to have super sharp edges. And even if you buy a brand new anvil from the U.S. or wherever, you're going to dress those edges with a grinder before you start using it.
Hmm.
That's cool. Will, I was really pleased to hear you say that you used to hunt and trap. Hopefully, you still get out hunting. George and I hunt and fish, and I imagine it be really satisfying to pull out a knife you made yourself and use that to skin a moose. Or do you have a favorite piece that you've made that you kind of keep to yourself with pride? Either filleting knife or hunting knife or axe, any of those?
Um, I've got a couple of knives that I've made for myself that, they were part of the learning process. So they're special to me that way. I wouldn't count them as super beautiful, but they're a step in the progression. So I think they're special that way. And they get used in the shop, or if I'm camping, I don't hunt anymore. I just honestly don't have time. So, but if you're camping or you're out or doing whatever, it's nice to pull those out of off the hip and use them right for what they were meant to be used for. But again, it's not something that I would be showing off to a bunch of people saying, "Oh, this is." These are early knives that when I first started doing it, and like I said, they're a step in the progression, and it's kind of cool to look at that and think, "Oh, I've come, quite a ways from there, and this is what I can do now." But you still want to hold on to those, right?
Yeah, an old slogan that I like to use in bushcraft is try to make tools, not trophies. I like stuff to be functional. It shouldn't be pretty stuff that you put on the wall, and that's the way I feel
Exactly.
about it. Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that too. Is you functional over fashion, right? A good story. So the last 2 years, I've been flown up to a First Nations reserve, fly in north of Fort McMurray. So the high school actually brings me up there to teach the First Nations kids about blacksmithing and do some knife forging. I'm going back up there in May, so they're flying me up again. And the last time I was there, we made knives for these teenagers, and they just loved it. Like, they were right into it, this group. They had so much fun. And then the comments were, "I'm taking this out caribou hunting with me. I'm going to skin my caribou with it." And I thought, you know what? That's a success. If that's the
Fantastic.
case,
Yeah,
that's what they're going to do, then you know what? I've done my job, and that's kind of where I want to be with it, right? Like, if I'm helping people and they can take a tool that they've made out of a block of steel and then use that to process some game, isn't that a win, right?
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That leads right into, we have some would you rather questions. Scott, I know you got a few of these too. This actually was a would you rather question I had written down, so now I feel like I know the answer. But okay, Will, so would you rather be known for making incredibly intricate artwork? Because I know, like, I've seen, like, you've done some, like, amazing gates and handrails and, like, these rose tables, like, amazing. Or for creating functional tools that last a lifetime?
That's a hard question because I enjoy both of those. But if I could have a tool that has my punch mark on it, and 100 years from now, somebody says, "Hey, I wonder where this came from. Look, there's a special, touch mark. Let's go search and see if we can find some information." And that popped up. That'd be great, right? Like, you want to make tools that last and will get used through multiple generations. So I think if I could get to that point and down the road when I'm gone and people are still using some of the things that I've made, then that's a success.
Yeah. What are you feeling about that one, Scott?
Yeah, to me, again, function over beauty, or function over trophies. So yeah, it's gotta work. It doesn't have to be the prettiest thing. And sometimes the prettier things that I've built in bushcraft ended up not being as functional as something that, wouldn't have been a great picture. So yeah. And you find that, right? You'll meet some old timer up north in Canada, and he's been using this old knife, and it looks like crap, but the thing works, and he knows how to use it and sharpen it. And I'd rather be that guy than the guy who's bought the $500 knife from some place in West Edmonton Mall and never touches it.
Yeah,
that's just my philosophy.
Yeah.
So I had a question here, Will, and I got so many would you rathers, we could go all night. But if and this is not the would you rather, but how much has blacksmithing changed? Like, if you could jump in a time machine and travel back 200, 300 years to a little European village, Anglo-Saxon village, could you put on a leather apron and blend right in? Like, would you know what you're doing?
Yep. I that's kind of the goal that you strive for. My thing when I was learning this was learn the fundamentals. Those fundamentals have been around for thousands of years, right? How to work the steel in the fire, what color, what temperature you're looking for, how to work it on an anvil, or, on a piece of steel that you're working on. It might not be an anvil. It might just be a chunk of steel. And when they started, they were using rocks. So, how to move that metal, and the fundamentals are super important, because there's something you're going to use to build up your skill level. And those fundamentals haven't changed, honestly, in 2,000 to 1,500 years.
That's great.
How to draw a point, how to taper something down, how to flatten it, how to round something. how to do forge welding. They figured out how to do forge welding basically at the start of the Iron Age. And we're still using that. I'm using a coal forge, which isn't much removed from a charcoal forge that they would have used 2,500 years ago.
That's great. Keeping the
Yeah.
tradition alive. So here's my would you rather, kind of building off of that. Would you rather be a blacksmith in a Viking village or a blacksmith in a medieval Japanese samurai clan?
Your life expectancy in both, I think, is probably pretty short. But because of the nature of the warfare going around you, but blacksmiths in either culture like that would have been highly prized, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you're probably going to live longer in the Japanese world because they would have protected you. If you were a sword maker or a talented blacksmith, in the those days in Japan, you would have been a vital asset for the kingdom and for the shogun, and he would have protected you. Whereas
you're everybody's favorite guy. Yeah.
Absolutely, I think if you were in Europe in that time, your life is probably a little bit worth less. You're still valuable because there weren't that many people that were doing it, but things were a little bit more precarious there and less structured. So yeah, I think the Japanese way would probably be better.
Nice. You got time for a couple more, George? Couple more would you rathers?
Yeah. So the next would you rather I had written down is Viking related also, but
let's hear it.
Yeah. Okay. So would you rather be on a Viking ship invading lands or overtaking castles, like you're a knight, you're riding horses, that sort of thing? Viking or castles?
Land-based?
Yeah.
I think probably land-based. I spent 7 years in the Navy, and I know what the ocean's like, and it can be a terrible place. And if you're in a 90-foot open Viking wooden ship attacking ports after you've crossed the North Sea, I don't know how good a shape you're going to be in. But riding a horse and foot soldiering and marching and stuff like that, I think you're going to be in better shape, probably better fed. You're probably warmer. Yeah. It's kind of a cold place. Trust me, I've been there.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same, George.
I thought you'd be going Viking for sure, Scott.
Well, it's in my heritage, but the thing is, I'd probably be puking all over the place. You're eating dried fish and pickles, and like Will said, if you're on land, you've got some good solid footing under your feet. You probably sleeping better. Although there is the hot tar that's pouring down on you, on the siege and all that, but right. I take my chances there. I've got another good battle one here.
Okay.
Would you rather enter an ancient battle with swords and spears? Would you rather, you got three options. You're completely drunk, so you're not feeling sort of the fear and the pain, or you're fully sober, or you're somewhere in between. George, we're going to start with you.
I'm going somewhere in between. I don't want to be completely drunk, but I want to be like a little, maybe free, maybe okay, like I'm throwing myself into the battle. So
beer buzz, beer
right
buzz.
In the middle. Yeah, that's the time when you're like, okay, I can do this. I can win this challenge. Yeah.
Is that a 6-pack or a 3-pack for you? What are you doing?
Probably 6-pack. Yeah.
Now you got to pee all over the place.
Right. Exactly.
How about you, Will?
I think probably completely smashed. If you're fearless. If you look at the history of the British Empire, from the 1400s, 1500s onwards, most of the Royal Navy was hammered every day, and same with the foot soldiers. You were given a rum ration. We had the rum ration in the Canadian Navy up until the 1970s, and honestly, we would still do the tot back, on the Queen's birthday, or if we did really well in an exercise or a gun shoot or something like that. And 2.5 ounces of Pusser Navy rum gives you all the courage you're ever going to need to storm a castle. You're pretty much fearless at that point. So, and there's all kinds of stuff they would use, back in the Middle Ages to prep the troops, right? They'd feed them well, and then they'd get them drunk, and then they'd send them into battle, right? So
Totally. Yeah, no, you're right about that. I've done some research, and even the Viking berserkers, they had their own concoction of
Mhm.
alcohol and shrooms that would get them fired up and fearless. But yeah, you imagine what hand-to-hand combat would have been like. It would have been horrific. So anything to take the edge off, I think would have been welcome. Yeah. You got another one there,
Absolutely.
George?
I only had the two, Scott. So if you got another one,
I got one more.
okay.
One more. Um, would you rather have to duel an opponent to death and that person is your same fitness level
Mm.
and skill level? So basically, you're fighting your identical twin,
Hmm.
or you battle a grizzly to death with the spear of your choice. So it's hand to hand combat with your identical twin, or hand to hand combat with a grizz and a spear. What are
How
you
did you think
choosing?
these up?
Oh, I've never grown out of the grade 9 phase. I never will.
Yeah. Oh boy,
I mean, I'm going
that's a good.
Grizzly. I think I got to go
Yeah.
Grizzly. Like, I don't think I have the craziness to take on like like those UFC fighters and stuff. They have like that level of crazy where they can just like flip the switch and they're going. I don't think I have that level where I could just take it that far. So I think I'm going Grizzly. I think that's my move. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I
How
would
about
have
you,
to go
Will?
Grizzly as well, because one well placed hit and it's over.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're fighting somebody that's armored up and has the same weapon than you, it's a lot more about skill, right? And than that lucky shot. And if you make the wrong mistake with the grizzly, you're never going to know it because it's all over anyways in
Right.
a
Exactly.
heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking the same, probably for me, because I'd hate to kill a person in hand to hand combat, even if I could, being my identical twin. But yet a grizzly's probably going to kill me. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it would feel better way to go. Yeah. Yeah, that's my would you rather's there, George, unless you got anything else.
I just had a few more questions before we wind this down. But Will, I
Yeah.
was one of the things as I was going through like your Instagram and the pictures and stuff, like you have just seems like such a range of things that you're making. Do you have a favorite like thing to make?
Um, kind of the favorite theme I would say is imitation of nature. I love trying to come to as close to the natural world in my forging as I can. So leaves and trees and branches and things like that. I spend a lot of time kind of thinking about where that's going to go, and if we can do a little tweak on something and it's going to look more natural. So yeah, like the imitation of nature I think is the thing, is big thing for me. So when I get an opportunity to make a gate or a table and I can incorporate flowers and branches and trees and birds and things like that, then absolutely, that's a lot of fun. What was I making the other day? Oh, actually, last night I was just fooling around making some steel rings, and I found that very challenging and very rewarding once you do it. Right, you make a perfectly round circle and you weld the ends up. So, things like that, for sure. But definitely the imitation of nature, like leaves, flowers, are really
Yeah.
cool, and things like that. A lot of enjoyment out of that, right? It's almost therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
And the whole blacksmithing thing in general, I can honestly say it's made me a better person, and it's completely therapeutic for me to be in the shop and no distractions and just focusing on your work. I think everybody should have some sort of an outlet like that
Yeah.
And what
to
do you
kind of.
think, Will, what do you think the future of blacksmithing is? We've talked about what an ancient art it is, but is it growing? Will it always be there? Is there a bright future for blacksmiths in a modern world, in a future world?
Absolutely. You're getting more and more creative artists out there. We're seeing more of it in North America. If you go to Europe, if you spend any time in Europe, you're surrounded by it. They've done ornamental ironwork there for, 800 years, and some of it is still existing on the buildings they have there. So it's lovely to go out and see that. It's slowly coming here to North America. The structure of the buildings we have, we're not super heavy focused on rock and things like that. It's all wood, and now we're using plastics and things. But there's still opportunities for wrought iron work and decorative iron work here. It's a growing field. It honestly is. I'm as busy as I'll ever want to be. I work hard. I enjoy what I do, and I'm really lucky to do it. But there is opportunity for growth in this industry for sure. There's not many people doing it, and it's kind of, you find your niche and what you like doing, and it's total opportunity from there. Once you get good at what you're doing, and you get a following and people like your work, then it starts coming to you. So definitely room for growth, and we're seeing more and more people get into it. I think COVID was a big driver of that. People were looking for hobbies, and things to do at home, and a lot of people took this up, and it's carried on. Like, honestly, today in the shop, I sold 2 forges and an anvil in like an hour. People came in and just set themselves up, right? So yeah, it is a growing field, right? It's slow, but it is increasing. If you look 20 years ago, there was probably no blacksmiths around, maybe 1 or 2 in a say northern Alberta here, or central Alberta. Now we've got, there's 3 or 4 of us here that are doing it. In Ontario, there's even more. There's lots and some really good artists in BC and Quebec, and there's an artist in Montreal that made a bunch of the iron hardware for the well, they had the big fire there. The famous church. I can't remember the name.
Mm-hmm. The cathedral there. Yeah.
The cathedral, yeah. So he made the Montreal artist made the wrought iron work for that. So, you're getting that kind of stuff coming here to North America. So I think it's great.
Do you got something on the bucket list, Will? Like something you want to make, or maybe you're dreaming of making? You're like, man, I want to make this one day. Like, is there anything on the list that you can think of?
I've been working on a sculpture for about 2 years now, and it's an ocean theme. So it's actually an octopus leg coming out of the water, and it's when I get time I work on it. But it's been a vision in my head for years to finish this off. It's coming along really nice. It's been a tremendous amount of work, and I can't wait to finish it. But you also have to kind of put that. I can't focus on it because it's not something. We've got to keep the shop going, and we have to have cash flow and things like this, right? We're running a business, so you can't always do the stuff you want to do. I try to take a day a week where I work on my own projects. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but yeah, that I want to finish that sculpture off. It's important to me, and I think it's going to be beautiful, and people will really like it. So hopefully in the next few months I can finish that off, and I'll get that out into the public.
Perfect.
Cool.
Will is coming to Hinton. If you want to make a knife with Will, or a railway spike knife, I do feel like that is, I mean, I can imagine like eating my supper with a railway spike knife. Like that's pretty badass. So he's coming to Northern Rockies Museum. You can check out, I know like on the Northern Rockies Museum website and on their Instagram page, there's a link to it in the QR code you can scan and sign up for that. So May 24th and 25th, that's happening. Check out Will's work. Theforgeco.ca is the website, and we'll have a link to him on Instagram, but the_forge_co_CDN on Instagram for that. Will, thanks so much for taking the time and chatting with us tonight. This was insightful, and like your passion really comes through, and we love talking to people that are passionate about what they're doing. And if, like you mentioned a few times, like you found your niche and you just said, let's do it. So it's awesome to see. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great, talking about this, and I like kind of spreading the knowledge around, and that's why I teach classes. Is I think everybody should have the ability to learn this stuff if they want to do it. But thank you again for having me. This has been great. It's been a lot of fun, actually. I've never done a podcast before, so I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's great. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks, Will.
Awesome.
Follow along with Scott's adventures. Scott, you just posted, I think today, even pictures of your new bow you made and some arrows. So at the Northern Rockies Bushcraft on Instagram, we'll have a link to Scott, of course, too. But Scott, you firing that bow yet? You hitting the target?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it shoots really good. I'm hoping to use it for some hunting. It's a U bow, a long bow, flat bow design.
Nice.
Pretty exciting. Taken a few years to season and then labor of love, as we talked with Will, stuff that you do not to make money, but to pour in the time and the effort, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
And
should
so,
we should work together. We should work together, and I've made quite a few bodkin points. So
oh, that'd be
if you've got a
fantastic.
longbow, yeah, if
Yeah,
you've got a
see,
longbow, I can make you some bodkin points. So
that would be great. I flint knap and I make the stone points and bone points. I try to get back to the real primitive traditional methods and use sinew wrapping and all that. But yeah, I'm heading out in the bush with my boys this weekend. We'll be camping out in the hills, and I'll probably take the bow with me, see if we can pop a rabbit or so, throw some bacon in the pan, see what we can do.
Perfect.
nice.
Well, thanks, Will.
And Will's
Thanks.
Instagram as well. We should remind folks of that to follow along with his adventures there.
Oh yeah, it'll be linked in through us. But yeah, as the Forge, the underscore Forge underscore co underscore CDN. You can find Will there too. But just Will has so much, like, there's such a variety of the things he makes. Like, oh, you just made some roses on a table, and then there's the coffee table with, like, it looks like a tree. Like, it's just incredible stuff you can see that made out of that Will's made. So super cool. We'll link up to that. Thanks for listening, guys. If you are listening, you want to send us a review, that'd be fantastic. And if you want to get a hold of us, wildernesswave@outlook.com. One of the best ways to do that. Until next week, stay wild.
Wilderness Wavelength.